So I'm the president and founder of TLC Tech. Most of you are our existing partners, so you're already aware of who I am. Justin, again, is the founder and the CEO at Techrug. Justin, I met a couple of years ago at some different industry events. Over the years, we've been talking. Justin actually does provide our cyber liability insurance policy for TLC Tech. I like how they behave. I like how they present. I like their philosophy about what happens if the worst happens, which is why I wanted to get him in front of all of you today to be able to answer questions, ask questions. I've got a slide deck that we'll do. Justin is really horrible going off of the slide decks, and we'll kind of go, he's going to go take the conversations where they need. A reminder that inside of the window for the GoToWebinar, there's a questions pane. Please pop your questions in there and I'll go ahead and ask them to Justin as they come up. We really want this to be as interactive as possible. I've got some questions for him as well that we'll go through on the slide deck. They're kind of, you know, we'll get to those, but it's basically really what's the difference between this kind of a policy versus a add-on policy to an existing business liability that I have. So the first thing, first deck is looking at the alarming stats. And Justin, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone coming on today, and those of you that'll watch it later. Yeah, so these statistics, I'm not going to read them line by line, but basically, you know, the cyber environment is bad and it's getting worse. And what do I mean by that? Like, just from an insurance standpoint, you know, you're starting to see now carriers exiting the space. In other words, they don't feel comfortable offering cyber liability insurance anymore because they aren't making money on it. You know, and like any product, when the carriers get into it, you know, when they're writing these policies, they don't expect the policy to do certain things that it does. In other words, we didn't expect ransomware to be what it was today, or we didn't expect, you know, certain insuring agreements to act like they do in a claim, and they do. So, you know, the carriers are looking at it, and you know what we've seen in 2021, and this is the first time in me doing cyber insurance. And again, I know it's becoming more popular, but the carriers ran into capacity issues. So capacity issues mean, and I'll just, you know, kind of keep it high level. You know, in 2021, with their reinsurers, they basically said, hey, we're going to write $100 million of cyber. And come August of 2021, they already wrote $100 million of cyber. They have no more capacity to write any more cyber. They can't do it. So you have to wait till 2022 and, you know, go in and get these new agreements in place and make sure that, you know, that they have the capacity. So, you know, what you're seeing, you know, from the carriers now is they continue to lose money, is they're going back to, you know, the insureds, which would be, you know, in this call, the accounting firm or the nonprofit or the chiropractor's office, and they're demanding that more security be in place. Okay, so if you were to look at an application on a cyber policy 2 years ago, it was kind of a joke. You know, it was really, do you run antivirus? Do you run firewall? And here you go. You know, and now they're getting into, I don't want to get too technical, but, you know, stuff that, you know, was kind of cutting edge even, you know, 12 to 18 months ago when it comes to, like, you know, EDR and active threat hunting and MDR and, you know, security awareness training and, you know, stuff like that, that some people might say, wow, this is new. You know, these are now mandatory or else you don't get the policy. And, you know,
Justin,
kind of my rule of thumb, oh, but I was just gonna say, my rule of thumb, Michael, would be, you know, if the policy's easy to achieve, be prepared of the exclusions or what they're offering.
Yeah.
If the barrier to entry is difficult and they drag you through and it's like, gosh, this is the fourth time I got to get back, it's probably a broad policy.
And just in living with our belief of we speak human, EDR is endpoint detection and response. MDR is another kind of system that will actually do some remediation. These are the required, the better, and the best that we've been talking about with our partners. You all saw that email from us earlier in the month, and that we started these services on December 1. This is part of the reason we started. A lot of our partners were looking at insurance policies, cyber, or doing an add-on, and we're getting these questionnaires. Hey, do you have this? Do you have that? And we're gonna, I think, actually just jump to that slide for a second, because that's really one of the things that has really happened and changed drastically, which is what is required to get a good policy. 2 years ago, like Justin said, it was, hey, do you have antivirus on a firewall? It's like, well, of course we do. What are we, stupid? Now it is shocking to see the number of things that are coming in. One of the biggest, and Justin, you might be able to talk about this, that they're expecting is two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, I mean, again, we are able to get, discounted rates for our MSPs clients, so Michael's clients, if they're interested in it. But MFA has to be everywhere. It has to be everywhere. Email, remote access, whatever it may be, it's a must-have now. So again, if you aren't doing it, the carriers either they won't write the policy. Those that will, they might take the premium and say, hey, instead of 10,000, it's now 25,000. They figure if we can get enough $15,000 increases, because it really, with the lack of MFA multi-factor, it really becomes, a when it's going to happen, not an if, Michael. And I don't know if it's going to be, 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years. But without that multi-factor, you are going to run into a ransomware attack, a business email compromise, or a cyber crime event. You have to have it on. You have to.
Yeah, and we're talking with all of our partners as part of this security initiative that we've been doing. We're meeting with all the partners, and one of the things is talking about securing the perimeter. If you have data, anywhere you have data that's accessible by a name and password only, you now have a security risk. Be that, like you said, already on the VPN, on email, on remote access into machines. And those are the kind of things that are getting required now for most of the good policies. What other kind of things are you seeing at a high level? And if you go geek, then I'll go ahead and do the translation to We Speak Human.
Yeah, no, I mean, like segregated backups, encryption. This is more of a business function, but like for the crime, what we call out-of-band authentication. So what that means is that if you get an email, let's say, that says, hey, we've changed our routing and banking information, the out-of-band authentication would say, you then call the person, or call dual authorization, and verify that they sent you the email. You don't respond back and say, did you really change it? Well, of course, at that point, the hacker, the bad folks, might have control of the email. What are they going to say? They're going to say, of course we did. So, making sure that you're doing, out-of-band authentication. I mean, there might be some banking things around like positive pay. I know each bank kind of does things a little bit different. But I think that's the biggest thing is, making sure that, you got the EDR, again, sorry, the endpoint detection response, the MDR, multi-factor everywhere, backups segregated, MFA on the backups, security awareness training. Trying to think if I missed out any other ones. But those are probably the main ones. You had that slide before, not to jump back, you don't have to go. But what people will ask sometimes, like, hey, I've got an endorsement, like me, I have an insurance company, and we buy insurance agent E&O. Well, our insurance agent E&O provider has an endorsement of cyber that you can add. Now, when you read the cyber endorsement, it really is covering the theft of PHI or PII. So when I say PHI, I mean protected health information. When I say PII, I mean like personally identifiable information, Social Security, driver's license. So I could purchase that endorsement as an add-on, but it only really covers the notification. And if something goes wrong, the credit monitoring, the forensics. So I would say that that's probably one bucket of why people buy cyber insurance. There's 3 main reasons when we talk to them. That would kind of be the first bucket. The other 2 buckets that doesn't address is it doesn't address my systems. What do I mean by my systems? If my systems are hit and there's a ransom, it is encrypted, and there's a ransom on that saying, hey, Justin, give us $300,000 or we don't give you the decryption key so that you can access your database. The standalone policy didn't pick that up. Also, what goes along with your systems is that when you're down, there's this thing called business interruption you might want, right? If you miss out on opportunities, you would want to make sure that the policy contains business interruption. There's bricking coverage. Bricking coverage is called computer hardware replacement. On all these ransomware attacks, your hardware will get destroyed and you will have to buy new hardware. You want to make sure you've got, computer hardware replacement. So, the systems is really an important thing. I would say that the days of the PHI and the PII are so, I don't know, 2016, if we're going to go back 5 years. Now what people want is that second bucket. Hey, if my systems go down, I want to be able to pay the ransom. I want to collect business interruption. I want to have computer hardware replacement. And the third group that we get calls from, they always center their questions something around some sort of cyber crime event, right? They know somewhere where there's unauthorized electronic funds transfer, and their friend that owns that company lost the money, or they were subject to a business email compromise. When I say a business email compromise, that's somebody generally taking over your email without you knowing, and they're going to allow you to see the regular day-to-day emails, anything to do with payments. They're going to hijack it, move it over to another system, and communicate with those people so that they are able to get those funds from those people. So, the cyber crime, again, these add-ons, they might, I don't know, they might give you like $25,000 or something. But when we get calls, Michael, I mean, it's people that have lost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. I mean, these aren't $10,000 claims usually. So, going back to that earlier slide, that's the difference between a standalone and a full comprehensive cyber. You want to go with the full comprehensive cyber because it just does more, it covers more, and you generally don't have low sublimits and you generally get high limits. So sublimits, you'll see a lot of times on your policies, the crime will be sublimited. So they might give you $1 million, and then when you go to the crime, maybe it's only $100,000. So you might want to work with the carrier and see what can we implement to get that 100,000 to 250. They're probably not going to give you the full mill, but the higher up or the closer you can get to that million, the better. So stick with the comprehensive and ditch the standalone or the what you want to call the add-ons or endorsements to the policies.
So Justin, what should they look for in their existing policies? Because as I've been talking to partners, they say, yeah, I'm pretty sure I have a cyber liabilities policy built in. What kind of questions do they want to ask of their insurance people to make sure that they've got the coverage that they should have?
Yeah. I would just ask for what they call a list of insuring agreements. So insuring agreements are, what's built into the policy that will pay if something goes wrong. So, a policy might have network security. That insuring agreement would tell you if there's unauthorized access into our system and something were to happen, then the policy will respond. Obviously, you want to make sure you got things like privacy liability, the theft or disclosure of PHI or PII. You want to make sure that it's got cyber extortion in the event of a ransomware attack. Can we pay these bad actors? You want to make sure it has things like business interruption or cost to replace the data. You want to make sure that it's got bricking coverage or computer hardware replacement. Make sure it covers PR if it this gets out and somehow clients are aware and you get a bad name or bad reputation because of it. You want to make sure that you've got a PR budget. So I would say, Michael, a good policy without boring people and going through what each insuring agreement does, because I just want to keep it high level. But I would say that a good policy is probably going to have 12 insuring agreements that are vital that you need to make sure that are on your policy.
Okay. And you can look at that and do a comparison and let them know what's the difference between a standalone and what they currently have.
Yeah, again, my rule of thumb is like, if you're going to a general practitioner and you've got a heart problem and you're not going to see a cardiologist, it's probably not going to end up real well in terms of the surgery, right, or the diagnosis. So I would say, listen, I'd be happy to help, but if you've got someone that specializes in cyber, you're probably okay because they do this day in and day out. If you're going to somebody that does landscapers, bakeries, home, and auto, it's probably not going to end up well.
And one of the examples, most of the partners on this call of ours know that I'm in a peer group. One of the things that happened with one of our partners, one of their people got hit, one of their clients got hit. That particular company, the insurance said, okay, send us the hard drives to do the forensics. It took them a month to get an answer back of what had actually happened. And they did have PII, so personally identifiable information. So that particular client is hanging out for a month not knowing what of their data got provided, because that insurance policy is saying, hey, our people will do the forensics, but there was no timeline involved on it. So it's kind of my example of not everything's created equal, and that was an add-on, that was a rider to their policy. So
I think one thing too, Michael, that people need to understand, like we're talking about insurance, Michael probably loved me for promoting this, but it's protection and insurance, right? It's security. I mean, the carriers aren't going to let you get by anymore if it's a good policy without having certain security. But, I would ask everyone on this, webinar, if you don't think security is that important, right? Unplug your systems tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock and turn them back on at 5 and tell me how your day goes. Like we call it a ransomware fire drill. We live in an age right now where your email and your systems are so critical and so vital and so important to you running your business. And if you don't have those things and you don't have a well-written insurance policy, we get people that call us all the time that don't have good security and they don't have the right insurance. Michael, they're shut down for 3 weeks. I mean, we're talking sleepless nights, people that have had to get, anxiety pills, Klonopin, Valium, they've gone to, like, I know it sounds crazy, but they've gone to counseling and stuff like that. Because when you got clients that are saying, hey, I need this information, and you can't access a database to get that information, and they keep bugging you, it's very stressful, So like that, to me, the two have to go together. I don't know, it's almost like, I'm sure a lot of people either have some sort of security system or a Ring doorbell or something at their house, right? Is that you want to do as much as you can to prevent the robbers or the burglars from getting through. And then if they get in the house, you got to make sure that you got insurance for your big screen TVs and your jewelry and your furniture. So that's kind of my analogy is, with the security, make sure that you've got a sound, that some of the stuff we're talking about today, and, I leave it up to you and your team on comment and what they need, but, making sure that you're doing the right things and investing in it. Listen, I'm a consumer of security just like everyone else is, right? But I see these day in and day out. And for the last 5 years, I've always said, I'm going to invest a ton of money in security in my phone systems, because if I can't access my email, if I can't access our management system, and I can't return phone calls, I don't have a business, right? Yeah. I'll save on paper plates or bottled water or other things, So, it's really, really important. And kind of, I'll turn it back over to you after this, but the number of people, when I ask them, would you look now at more security and would you look at cyber insurance after being down 3 weeks? And they'll tell me, like 99.9% of them, I don't ever go through that again, And so I just don't want the people that haven't been subject to a ransomware attack, a business email compromise, or a cyber crime event. Yes, go get insurance. But when you use the insurance, there's usually a fire, right? In other words, we don't get called because everything's great. We get called because there's a fire. Try to contain the fire to a 1-bedroom fire, not a whole house fire. That's where the security comes into play, okay? With the proper security, you can keep this to a 1-bedroom fire. Don't get in whole house fires. They don't turn out well.
Yeah, and that's that's where we're going, and all of our partners know we've been having meetings with them and continuing to keep meeting with all the partners, that the world has changed a lot over the last several years, but over the last 12 months, it has gotten really, really insane. The hackers and the evil people have really figured out how to exploit, because everybody had to go home and start working. Everybody had to be able to get remote. It's one of the reasons we've been implementing this required security setup. We want to make sure that we're doing our part in the protection, which is getting the security set up, also making sure that on the flip side, because unfortunately today there is never ever going to be 100% guarantee that the evil actors can be kept out. Everybody has seen the headlines, everybody's seen all of it, the government agencies, the huge Fortune 500 companies that have had the hacks occur into their systems. So we've got to make that barrier of entry as high as possible. That's the multi-factor authentication. That's the 2FA. It's us putting in more and continuing to advance the security initiatives that we can offer on our side. And on the partner side, it's making sure that they have their level of protection on the insured side.
And I just want to remind Michael, like, some people might be going, oh, this is really scary. A lot of these attacks, they're definitely sophisticated attacks, and there's, these hackers and, these bad actors, they go after people and they're very sophisticated. But overall, a lot of these attacks, to kind of like give you an example, it's like throwing a big net into the ocean. Yeah. And you're just bound to have fish that'll swim in. They're just looking for some basic vulnerabilities, right? And that's all they aren't. They aren't really that sophisticated. So, again, with the proper, security hygiene, right? A lot of these problems don't have to occur. It's just when you get in the situation where you're not doing what, again, I would say in this day and age, MFA, segregated backups, encryption, all that. If you're not doing that, that would be bad hygiene,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we had talked, I think we've covered part of this already, but kind of the round 2 of requirements. Originally it was, do you have the 8 antivirus? Do you have backups? Now do you have 2FA on every VPN account? Do you have 2FA on Office 365? We actually saw one policy came in, that wanted to have two-factor authentication on every network switch in their office. That was one of the newer ones that went, wow, they're really getting tight. What are some of the other things that you're starting to see as the questions that are coming through?
Yeah, I mean, it's questions too, but it's also like, the carriers are kind of, and again, I'm going to use another tech term, but they're getting into the MSSP space almost, right? So they're doing what we call like external surface scans. So they're monitoring your network. You have MSPs like Michael that are doing the production environment, which is super important. They're looking from the outside of how these bad actors can get in, right? So I don't even know if I want to call it round two of requirements. I'm going to almost say round two of prevention, right? Is, they're getting, I had one the other day where, our underwriting team had emailed and they found a client, there were some GoDaddy vulnerabilities, and they had emailed and said, hey, listen, this particular accounting firm in Texas, they've got 72 hours to change their password and turn off 2FA or else the policy's no good. So, yeah, so they're going to continue to monitor these things, because, they want to know what's going on. So, I think, that's kind of today, where it's going to go to tomorrow. They might get a little bit more big brotherish, and making sure that if they're going to put up, millions of dollars on these policies, they want to make sure that they know exactly what's going on. I mean, if you look at, even your home insurance these days, I mean, they can tell you if you just went and bought a dog. They can do, satellite shots to see if you have a trampoline, right? I mean, and then all of a sudden you'll get an email or, something in the mail that'll be from your home insurance carrier. Hey, we understand you have a trampoline. We've got to put this. Well, how do they know it? They're constantly keeping track of what's going on, and that's starting to take place in the cyber environment. So, I guess in terms of round two of what's going to go on with these carriers, they're going to continue to monitor, what the other side's doing and how they can get in. They're going to do it from the external. They're going to expect the IT people to worry about the production environment and the inside of the house.
Which is where we're talking to our partners about protecting the perimeter. That's the same way. Anywhere there's a way in, they want to make sure that that's being protected by multi-factor 2FA. Awesome. Again, I don't have any questions from you all yet. Please feel free to pop in any questions. Next one, we kind of mainly talked already about what's in a good policy. Anything that you add there?
No, I think, yeah, I'd make sure, just ask for a list of, what are my insuring agreements in the policy. It's going to be vital that, the more that you have out there, obviously the better. Again, without getting in depth, and a lot of people probably aren't going to do it, but, just take a peek at the exclusions. You might see things. Sometimes people will have, hey, that we cover mobile devices. Well, then when you go to read it, there's an exclusion that says if the mobile device isn't encrypted, there is no coverage. So you're reading something that says it is when it's really not. And, so I would take a peek at the exclusion. I've seen other ones where, some of these exclusions, they'll have, on the it'll be kind of, I guess, be centered around the cyber crime event. But, if you aren't doing, kind of like I told you, it'll say you got cyber crime, but then it'll say, if you don't do that dual authorization or out-of-band authentication, verifying by another means other than the way it was received. So if it was a phone call, send an email. If it was an email, get on the phone. They might have an exclusion for that. So just take a peek at the exclusions. But again, I think that's why you got, somebody that's a trusted advisor is, to kind of go through that and make sure, hey, listen, this is a policy that best fits your organization based on the underwriting we've done. And, kind of going back, I mean, if you're going through a lot of, questions, or they're asking you to do a lot, chances are you got a good policy.
Yeah.
And people always say, oh, the carriers don't pay. If the carriers didn't pay, why are they exiting the space, right? I mean, these policies are still relatively inexpensive, and they're very, very, very broad in what they do. So, to me, I mean, cyber has to be part of your insurance portfolio, just like workers' comp is.
And when you get those questions, and we've already, most everybody's going to be asking us to help them fill them out as well, and that's what we're here for. So we're happy to help you figure out anything that you need to know on what needs to be put into place when you go for a cyber liability policy. I had told most people attending that this would be under a half an hour and we'd leave time for questions, and we've actually gotten to the place for questions. So we'll open that up to the floor. Again, if you look inside of the GoToWebinar, there's an area where you can type questions. Pop any questions that you have to me. Hopefully we answered most of them during the presentation. I'll give you guys a minute or two to do that. Justin, while we're waiting for any questions, kind of any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, like I said, as much as we talk about it, I don't want people leaving this call thinking, oh, it's there. I mean, because there is no silver bullet, right? But you can mitigate as much risk as you can by, investing and getting the proper security, and by taking out, the correct insurance policy. I mean, at least for our clients, I know that we ask them to do a lot. We have seen a reduction in claims. So I think things are getting better out there. It's just, some people kind of still want to keep their head in the sand and ignore what's going on. And I'm just telling you that with the amount of money that's out there, whether I think it's right or wrong, there's people that are making a lot of money on these ransomware attacks and these, business email compromise, cybercrime events. They're going to continue to invest money and manpower, so it's not going to go away. And our life is more convenient than ever in terms of what's at our fingertips. But sometimes there's also some dangers around the corner with that, and we just have to address and identify those dangers and deal with them. But if done, a lot of these things that we're talking about today, the chances of them happen and why they still exist, they diminish greatly with the right security. And then if you got a cyber policy that you can have someone on your doorstep within hours to help you out, again, it's probably going to be a fire, but it's going to be a small fire. It's not going to be a whole house fire. So that's what I leave on. Just take security seriously, and everyone should carry cyber insurance.
And Microsoft, and this is in a slide deck that we talk to our partners about. 99.9% of most every breach at Microsoft would be blocked if they had 2FA in place. It's such an easy, low-hanging fruit. Now, we're in the state of California. There are some requirements if you're requiring your employees to use their cell phones to do this. But again, when he's talking about security, there's levels of security, and each layer that you can add to make that fence a higher hurdle for these people to get past limits the chance of you getting hit with an actual cyber incident. We have a question on how much coverage should you have? Is $1 million too little these days?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There's a lot of factors, so what industry are you in? What, how many people do you have? What's the geographic, kind of disbursement of employees look like? Are they overseas? Are they all in the US? So there's a couple things that, you really got to pay attention to. But yeah, we definitely see that it's overwhelming. Like 85% of our renewals, clients are asking for higher limits. So it used to kind of be $1 million as a starting point. It seems like now $2 million is, but I don't want to misrepresent or mislead you on. There's no, exact answer to that. And what I mean by that, whoever asked the question, is that, is the ransom going to be 200,000 or is it going to be 2 million? I don't know. I've seen them both. Is when we ask for the decryption keys and we pay for that one test decryption key, is it going to work the first time or not? Because I've seen it both, right? And then when we do pay for the decryption key and it does work, when we get the rest of the decryption keys, are 30% going to work or 80% going to work? I mean, when they lock this up, you're talking about massive amounts of data. It takes a long time for this data to be unencrypted, right? So the longer it goes and the more days, the greater your business interruption claims are going to be, right? So, there is a certain, kind of, there's no real answer that you could give anyone out there and say, hey, I know that $2 million or $5 million is enough. I mean, there's been vendors, Michael, in our industry where they've gotten hit and the ransoms have been $50 and $70 million. There's no way those companies carry $50 and $70 million of cyber extortion. So, $1 million's better than nothing, but we definitely are seeing as a benchmark that 2 million is kind of the, the starting point.
Yeah, and for this particular partner, there's a fair amount of PII that they deal with. So the policy, my guess is the higher amount of PHI or PII info you have, the higher the policy limit you'd want to have.
And I haven't seen the data recently because again, the PHI and PI and the notification, that's not happening as much because when forensics goes through, they barely ever touch it. They're just there to encrypt it. The other thing that they're kind of doing is they're now the technology is getting better in that, we can retrieve from backups. So now what you're finding is now they're pivoting and saying, hey, we're going to take this data and the question, the person that had the PHI and PI, then they'll all of a sudden contact that person and say, hey, here's the last six digits of your social security number. How'd you get that? go ask XYZ healthcare provider how we got that, right? So they're shaming you into paying the ransom, which is kind of nasty to do. But that's kind of the new trick that we've seen. But I don't know, on a massive breach, it could be $10 per record. So when you said they've got a lot of PHI and PI, is that $1 million? Because then you got to start working the math backwards. If it's $10 per for a million, what, you getting $10 million that you got to carry? So you can see that it adds up real quick. But for that person that has a lot of PHI and PI, how many unique records do you have? And that kind of would be the where I would start at.
And you just did an interesting thing about how the threat vector, how the threat landscape is changing. It used to be they just encrypted, but now because the segregated backups, the offsite cloud backups, we can get, we should be able to get the data back in these circumstances. So now they're trying different tacks. Like you said, I know of one particular group that is doing crypto that got into PII, said they had the data, and then started calling the office because they hadn't been responded to. I mean, so it's what in the security presentation, I talk about that this is literally a game of whack-a-mole. And that's the kind of thing that they had a certain way that they could do. And then the industry responded and started doing their things differently. And so they just changed their game of how they play the game. So it's this continual evolution of playing whack-a-mole. We have another question that when you spoke about the list of insuring agreements, should you look for at least 12 agreements no matter the company size, or is that just a standard for any company that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, some of these companies would combine, like, for example, when I said network security is one insuring agreement and privacy liability, some might combine those two and call it, like, what do they call it? Like information security, privacy liability. So they might put those two together, right? I would say, again, if you're in that, range of 10 to 14 insuring agreements, you're probably going to be pretty good because, again, some of the ones that are important, like network security, privacy liability, business interruption, contingent business interruption, cost to replace the data, forensics, PR, making sure you got cyber crime, make sure you got invoice manipulation, contingent bodily injury. You see, I don't want to take you down that hole, of explaining what each one is, because they're going to put these people to sleep. But you got to get to the point where you're over 10 insuring agreements to have a really good policy.
Okay, so hopefully that answers the question for Kelly. If not, go ahead and add more in there into the thing. I can also follow. By the way, this is being recorded. We'll go ahead and be posting this on our YouTube channel. That'll be up in about a week. So that was a good long list of 10 to 12 different items. If you want to email me directly, I'm mnelson@tlctech.com. I can go ahead and forward that list on to you sooner than later if you want to reach out to your insurance company sooner than later. If there are no other questions, this is what we have. We really appreciate you guys taking the time coming and finding out what you need to know about cyber liability, how to make sure that you're well covered and that you've got the right policy. So that takes care of that. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate everybody attending.
Have a great one. Thank you.